Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the OVS VAP Training Center webinar titled Welcome to OVS. I'm Blake Cush, the Director of Training and Outreach for OVS, and today's webinar is a part of a series of webinars we offer through our VAP Training Center. Today's webinar will be led by Jennifer Amstutz of JA Strategies and Alan Krieger of Krieger Solutions. Jenny and Alan have more than 40 years of combined experience in consulting and training, working with nonprofits and agencies around the state of New York. Both Jenny and Alan have served as executive directors of nonprofit organizations, and both have master's degrees in management. Jenny and Alan are also our lead consultants for the Training and Technical Assistance Request Program that was relaunched this October. If you have not yet considered this new opportunity to bring some free training and consulting to your program, we urge you to check it out on the OVS website, and a link to that is also available in the resource document that we have shared for you today. Finally, as you exit today's webinar, you will be directed to an evaluation survey on the presentation. Please take a couple minutes to give us your feedback. You'll also have an opportunity there to notify us if you're also interested in receiving more training and follow up on this topic or a variety of other training topics. If you would like to ask questions today, we really encourage you to use our chat feature. On your screen, there's a chat button you can click and it'll pop up, and anytime throughout today's presentation, take advantage of the opportunity to chime in with a question. We will have opportunities once or twice during the presentation where we'll pause and actually review a couple questions if there's something relevant. So take advantage of that if you can. And then, again, at the end of today's webinar, take advantage of the evaluation survey and your opportunity there to notify us of some more follow-up and training opportunities for you. With that said, I'd like to formally welcome Jenny and Alan, and Alan's going to take over.
Okay, thanks, Blake. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide you information about OVS and its grants and compensations programs. It'll help you learn about what to expect as a funded OVS grants recipient. We're going to review compensation guidelines and filing procedures, VOCA funding, site visits, and grants record keeping. It's a lot to cover. We're going to give a high-level overview, and we have experts here with us to answer any specific questions you might have. Additional information is also available on the OVS website and from your contract management specialist. This information we're presenting today will be reviewed in more detail on your initial site visit. OVS was initially established in 1966 as the Crime Victims Compensation Board. It was one of the first independent state agencies for crime victim compensation. Then in 2010, CVB became the Office of Victim Services, or OVS, and OVS has been providing compensation to other services, providing compensation and other services to innocent victims of crime for over 40 years. OVS has a three-tiered mission: to provide financial compensation to innocent victims of crime, to advocate for victims' rights, and to fund a network of victim assistance programs such as yourself across New York State to provide services to crime victims. Over time, OVS services have grown. Each year, OVS makes approximately 10,000 original decisions regarding awards and denials for compensation. And this has resulted in over $23 million in compensation last year on 10,500 claims. In addition, OVS awarded 381 grants totaling $123 million to victim service agencies for the current fiscal year. With that background, we'll now take a deeper look at the OVS Victims Compensation Program. Jenny Amstutz will start off our review, which will focus on who is eligible for compensation, what is the maximum awards, in what circumstances are emergency awards given, and what it means that OVS is the payer of last resort. Then I'll be back to discuss how to file a compensation claim, including how to use the OVS Victim Services portal.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the OVS compensation program. The compensation program provides for compensation of out-of-pocket expenses to innocent victims of crime. It may provide compensation for certain relatives, some dependents, and legal guardians. In order to be eligible for compensation, you must meet one of the following criteria. You must be under the age of 18, 60 and over, disabled, or physically injured. There are certain exceptions for victims who still need to file a personal injury claim. And then injury claim even if they have not sustained a physical injury, and these exceptions are related to the type of crime. So for more information about these exceptions, you can consult the advocate guidelines for compensation that you will receive that I think are linked in your packet or in that form that we attached to the slides, or there's more information on the OVS compensation video series. The link is here. It's also in on the resource guide. There are 3 categories of claim types for compensation eligibility. Those are personal injury, death, and loss of essential personal property, or EPP. It's really important to note that you must file the claim by the type of crime that has been committed. So a personal injury crime must be filed under that claim, even if you're requesting personal property reimbursement as a benefit. If the claim is misfiled under the wrong category, it will drastically delay the processing of that claim. So this is a really important note. Very important to file the right type of claim. There are some compensation claims that have no maximum benefit. Those are medical and mental health, burial expenses of a police officer or firefighter who was killed in the line of duty as a result of a crime, and security devices. For all other claims, there are maximum compensation benefits, and those are listed here: loss of earnings, support and savings, burial expenses, crime scene cleanup, relocation, and essential personal property. Those are listed here, and they will be in the information that you receive, but they all have maximum amounts that will be paid out. Claimants can request emergency awards when an award would likely be made in a claimant's case anyway, and an undue hardship would result if that payment were not made immediately. But the emergency awards are only granted if the services have not, before the services have been rendered or paid, so if they haven't been paid for yet, and the maximum award is $2,500, except in the cases of funerals, when that award can be $3,000. The types of emergency awards available are those for funerals, for medications, moving or relocation, any loss of earnings, security devices or locks, crime scene cleanup, replacement of eyeglasses, contacts, or other medical equipment. But please note that OVS does not grant emergency awards for loss of property. So what does it mean to be payer of last resort? OVS is a payer of last resort, and so that means it really only covers the expenses that insurance or other resources have not paid. One thing to note is other resources include the GoFundMe campaigns that people often start related to crimes. If those GoFundMe campaigns are specific about the expenses that will be covered, for instance, medical expenses or funeral costs, OVS cannot reimburse for those same expenses. So if you're talking to people about creating a GoFundMe campaign, please make sure that those GoFundMe campaigns are as generic as possible and are not specific about the expenses that are going to be covered. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Alan to talk about how to file a compensation claim.
Okay, all the forms we'll be discussing today will be emailed to you with a welcome packet when your contract is finalized, and some can be found on the OVS website as well. On your screen is a list of the information that needs to be included for a claim to be considered complete. The date of the crime and the date it was reported should be in the month/day/year format. And if somebody has a Social Security number, they are required to include it. Don't check the box if they don't have one just because they can't find it. It's important to find it and then put that on the form. All the information listed here must be complete or the claim will be rejected. So it's best to hold on to a compensation request until the claim form is complete. And here's a list of documentation that should accompany a claim form as appropriate or as relevant. The Criminal Justice Agency report can include a police report, a Child Protective Services report, Adult Protective Services report, an unredacted domestic incident report, or a family offense petition with an order of protection. If you're missing any documentation, you should go ahead and file the claim anyway, as OVS begins processing a complete claim form. They will follow up to secure missing documents. These documents will be needed before compensation can be paid. Additional documentation may be requested later and could include medical bills, correspondence with insurance companies, and insurance cards. If a claim is closed or rejected due to missing information, OVS will send a letter, generally by email, indicating what additional information is needed. In this case, do not file a new application. Call the claims processing unit and provide the needed information, and they will reopen and update the original claim. Nearly 80% of claims are now filed through the OVS Victim Services portal, which is processed much more quickly than mail-in applications. If you file a claim online, you will need to upload the authorization page with the claimant's signature. Paper forms are available on the OVS website under the heading of General Forms. This is noted on the Welcome to OVS Resources PDF, which, if you haven't yet, you can download during the webinar or at the end. To obtain a login for the Victim Services portal, the director of the program has to email your contract management specialist the name of the individual victim advocate that you want to have access to the portal. The OVS staff will then add the advocate to the Victim Services portal, and then login information will be emailed to them. You can have multiple advocates having access. Just let your contract management specialist know that. You can find the link to the OVS portal page on the resource sheet, and you can expect to get an email with the login information from a ny.gov email address. So if it doesn't come in the first day or so, be sure to check your spam folder. It may be in there, and make sure you whitelist that address for the future. For more information on this, compensation trainings are held every third Tuesday in New York City and Albany. Also, you'll have an introductory site visit, which we'll be talking about in just a few minutes, and a compensation specialist will be part of that visit. And you can also view OVS's compensation training video series, which is available on YouTube, and the link is on the resource PDF. If you have other specific questions, feel free to contact your contract management specialist for more information. But we're going to stop here. Again, we have some specialists in the room. So if people have questions about compensation, please type them into the chat box if you haven't already done so. And we'll just pause a minute and see if there are any questions that we need to answer.
right, so those are the 3. All right, everyone, we've got a couple questions that are, we'd like to answer here for you. We've had a question here asking us to define an innocent victim. Cassidy, would you be able to help us answer that?
Yeah, an innocent victim of a crime to us would be a victim of a crime who didn't contribute to the crime in any way. We're not committing a crime at the time that the crime was committed against them, and their conduct did not contribute to the injury in any way.
Great, thank you. And we had a couple of you asked questions about the emergency award process. In particular, how do you apply for an emergency award?
To apply for an emergency award, first thing is you want to apply for a regular compensation claim. Once you apply for that, depending on what you are applying for the emergency award, whether it be burial, prophylactic drugs, moving and storage, there is a list of documents that are needed for each of them. Once you do obtain those documents for whatever you are requesting, there's an email address. We also have a fax that you'll send over an email to. It's ea@ovs.ny.gov, and that is in all of our materials. And just state that you would like to request an emergency award for that. It does go a little deeper than that, but that's the basic level of it.
Great. And then we've actually had quite a few of you ask about Social Security numbers. Alan referenced it earlier. And in particular, can a client without a Social Security number apply for services?
Yes. So if they have a Social Security number, it must be provided. But if someone or they do not have a Social Security number, they can just check off the box.
Great. All right. There are a few more questions. What we're going to do is try to aggregate all of these. So if your question did not get answered, keep typing them, keep submitting them in the chat feature. We'll do our best to independently answer them, and if not, at the end of the presentation, we'll export all questions and try to do some sort of frequently asked question document as well. So keep the questions coming, and we're going to go ahead and move on now.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the grants program. And here's a list of the topics we're going to cover in the next half hour or so. Again, feel free to type in questions as you think of them, and we'll respond to them at the end of this presentation. And Jenny's going to start us off with an overview of the grants program.
So October 1 started the new contract cycle for the OVS grants program, and this year, as a result of the 2019 VOCA RFA, there were 228 contracts that were awarded to 205 agencies across New York State, and there are 40 new agencies, and so hopefully all of you are on the phone today. But so that you will see that it's a significant, almost 20% of you are new agencies. So congratulations and welcome to OVS. I want to talk a little bit about the Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA, which this program is funded through at the federal level. So as the slide says, the OVS programs are all funded through the Victims of Crime Act, which was created in 1984 to support programs in states and local areas like these. VOCA has very specific regulations and requirements, and the use of OVS funds, as well as those of the match funds, must adhere to all of the VOCA and OVS regulations. We're not going to talk a lot about those regulations today, but there is information in your reference links if you want to find out a little bit more. 3 of the documents that you might consider looking at. The first one may be the most important, which is the allowable and the unallowable costs, which is just a list of what you really are allowed to spend your VOCA funds on and your matching funds and what you are not. The second is the VOCA side-by-side, which is a comparison of the federal guidelines passed in the law and then the federal rules that's issued by the Department of Justice that guides implementation. So it gives you a lot more details about what is funded and what the regulations are for the VOCA program. And finally, the third link is for the final rule itself, which is just the official documentation and language that was issued by the Department of Justice. All of these are available online at that link, and the specific links are in the resource document. So we're going to start talking about site visits, because there are site visits that are part of your OVS contract, and you'll be visited periodically by members of the OVS staff. All new programs will be visited in the first 90 days of your contract execution. So if you have a contract already in place, that you should be expected to be visited in the next 90 days by members of both the grants and compensation unit. This is a relatively casual visit. You'll get a letter beforehand, but during the visit you really will just get new information from OVS about the reports that you need to file, general information really about implementing your OVS program. It's a technical assistance visit more than anything. They will also give you more information about all of the forms we're about to talk about today. So we're going to go over a number of forms, as Alan mentioned when he did the overview. When you think about your questions, know that somebody from OVS will be visiting you and will be able to give you a lot more information about how to fill in these forms. We're really just giving you an overview of what those forms might be. Then after that initial visit, the Victims Assistance Programs must receive formal full site visits once every 2 years. So once every 2 years, you will be visited, at least once every 2 years, you'll have a formal on-site visit. And in addition to those visits, there may also have visits for the purpose of technical assistance and training, and you may have supplementary follow-up full-site visits if your program fails to implement recommendations made by your contract management specialist. So while OVS policy is to conduct the full-site visits once every 2 years, OVS does have the authority to conduct them a little bit more frequently if necessary. And if you request it, OVS can always bring compensation along with them to help staff with the compensation program if you're having an issue with that. So what happens during your regular formal site visits? As I said, the introductory site visit is not formal, and you'll get a letter beforehand. But to facilitate a regular formal site visit, programs will get an introductory packet approximately 30 days prior to the visit. And that packet will request information from you, both information you need to submit to OVS before the site visit and what you need to have ready at the site visit itself. These site visits are for monitoring and will look at your program's performance, your contract compliance, and your financial records. So what is OVS looking for at a formal site visit? They're checking your program against the program criteria. Are your programs running as they should be? They're looking at the condition of the program, how things are, actually are doing. If there are problems, they're looking for the cause of the problem and the effect that that problem is having on the program as a whole and on your clients. And finally, they'll make recommendations for correction if needed. It's important that all performed services are duly recorded and credited to the program in the victim's case file. And so the case documentation noted in the file must both adequately document VOCA allowable services that we talked about earlier, and those services that are provided by the program staff, and it will then make sure that they maintain confidentiality requirements. So during the formal site visit, the case file review, there will be a case file review that will give OVS staff an opportunity to look and to see if those things are happening. Case files are reviewed to verify that you're delivering the services that are listed on your program reports, which the performance measurement tool, which we'll talk about in a little while. The case file review is comprised of randomly selected files from all the direct service positions that are listed in your OVS contract. Case files can be redacted so that identifying victim information isn't viewed by OVS. For instance, you can redact names and addresses to maintain the confidentiality of your clients. I'm going to turn it back over to Alan now, who's going to continue with some of the forms we've been talking about.
Okay, so we're going to address a number of forms. The first is the summary of services log. If you haven't yet received this form, you'll be getting it soon. It's a way to help centralize your effort for reporting purposes and makes it easier for you to compile your quarterly statistics and to connect with the PMT, or the Performance Management Tool, and the FTR, or the Functional Time Records, two tools we're going to review next. The programs must maintain a summary of services log to track your ongoing accomplishments, and it should relate back to the services reported on the Performance Management Tool. So the PMT is a A federal system designed to collect both demographic data of the people served and services data documenting the services provided. The PMT measures your program's progress towards providing the amount of service you anticipated in your proposal. You can decide how to collect the data, but it must be reported on the PMT. It's a federal requirement that all OVC-funded programs complete the performance management tool on a quarterly basis. If you have any questions, contact your grants or your contract services manager. They're here to help you. And then we have due dates of when the reports are due. They're generally due by the 20th of the month following the close of each quarter. This is a very important form, and failing to complete your PMT puts the entire state of New York out of compliance. And you don't want to be the one to do that, so please try to get them in on time. If you have any questions and for more information, you might want to attend the training center session at the conference later this month. There'll be one specifically focusing on this tool. The link to access the OVC, Office for Victims of Crime, it's the federal PMT website, is on the slide and also on the resource PDF you should have downloaded. The resource page also includes the contact information that's on the slide here, the phone number and so on. Note that the OVC PMT website works best with Chrome version 4.1.0 and above, and with Internet Explorer version 11 and above. So if you're having any problem accessing the site, check the version of your browser and see if you can get one of the updated ones, or use Chrome and Internet Explorer if you're not. Your agency's designated point of contact will be added and sent an invitation, and additional users can also be added. The OVS PMT spreadsheet is an additional report that's required by OVS. It's used to cross-check the data you entered on the OVC PMT. So if any errors are found, OVS will get your OVC PMT unlocked and you'll be able to make corrections. The OVC PMT is very important, and OVS wants to make sure you complete it accurately, so they use the second spreadsheet as a cross-check to make sure that everything is accurate. The OVS PMT spreadsheet must also be completed by the same dates as the OVC PMT, PMT, and emailed to the OVS grants email as indicated on the slide. This email address is also, again, on the resource page. It's very important that you complete both PMT forms on time. Here's some additional information to help you complete the forms. There are instructions on the OVS PMT Excel form. There's an instruction tab right on the Excel form that has instructions for that form. Again, there'll be a PMT training at the conference. Contact your contract management specialist if you're not sure if you've registered for the session. You can also contact Rachel Gentili in the central office, and she can make sure that you get registered for that workshop. And I'm going to just give you a second here. We've given you a lot of information, let you collect your notes before we move on to our next tool.
So we have had some questions that have come up about the grant so far. Before we move on to the next part, so people don't get confused, we're going to just answer one or two of those now. Blake, do you want to read the question for us?
Sure. So we had a question about site visits. So if your organization has multiple locations, where does a site visit occur? I'm going to turn it over to Valerie, who's going to answer that for us.
Okay, that will be worked out, that arrangement will be worked out between you and your contract manager if you have multiple sites. If you are a new grantee, they will have to visit all locations at first. But if the programs can have your staff come to one location, then the site visit can be held at that one location.
All right, we had another quick question about digital records. So somebody asked, is it acceptable to only keep digital case records for victims, or will we be required to keep physical paper files?
So as far as that goes, we don't require you to keep paper records. If you have a database in which you're keeping all your information, that's fine. We don't have a requirement when it comes to paper files.
Okay. So that's a couple of them right now. Keep them coming in the chat box. We'll have another opportunity to answer more questions at the end of the grant section as well.
Okay, and there's some compensation questions that have come in. We'll try to circle around to those as well at the end. We're going to move on to our next form, which is the position description form. Has a confusing abbreviation of PDF. This is the position description form, and you've already completed it as part of your contract. And this form helps identify the amount of time staff will spend on VOCA allowable services. It includes the percent that's VOCA allowable versus non-allowable, the percent of each position that's on the OVS grant contract, and the total number of FTEs supported with OVS matching funds. Here's a picture of the form. And there's a yellow box highlighted in the upper right. It's very important that you put the right number into that box. That drives a lot of the form. It's the number of hours per week your agency considers a full-time position. If your agency may have different standard work weeks for different positions, you could fill out separate PDFs. So some staff may work on a 40-hour basis, others may be 37.5. So however you figure it out for those positions, you need to put that number up in the box that's highlighted there. And to complete the form, you have to enter each position title that's included in the approved contract budget, both OVS-funded and those used for match. If you have volunteers, they can be grouped together on one line. It's not necessary to break them out. Remember to check your work carefully as you complete this form. Each row should total to 100%. The information must account for each position's entire day, not just the part allocated to the grant. Put the time that is not VOCA allowable in the non-VOCA allowable column. This information should match the information you put on your budget. It should include the number of months the position is funded, the number of hours per week it's funded, and what percent is funded by OVS and what percent by match funding. We have a few more tools to discuss. Remember, if this is all new to you and it's feeling overwhelming, your contract management specialist is available to answer all your questions and walk through these forms again. So the next one is called the functional time records, or FTRs. And this tracks the actual hours worked and the number of hours spent in each function. The FTR must include all time work and must also reflect paid time off. The employee fills this out on a daily basis. Partial hours, such as 2.25 hours, can be entered into each box. The form calculates the percent of time spent in each category. The form is signed by the employee and supervisor at the end of each month. So here's a quick view of the functional time record form. You must complete the functional time records even if your agency uses a different timesheet. So you may have duplicate. If you want to keep your agency timesheet, that's fine. In addition, you must use this form. FTRs will be compared to agency time records, to the budget, and to the PDF, the position description forms, during site visits. OVS cannot pay for non-VOCA allowable activities, so be sure to review the FTRs carefully to make sure OVS is not being charged for activities that are not VOCA allowable. Jenny will now take us through some additional fiscal information you'll need to know to effectively manage your budget.
So I'm going to start talking a little bit about the required match. This is something that should be pretty familiar to those of you who filled out the RFP and have been going through the contract process. But all contracts do have a match requirement. That's 25% of grant funds, with the exception of those Native American programs. It's important to note that matching contributions do not have to be applied at the same exact time or in proportion to the obligation of your VOCA grant funds over the course of the year. So in any one quarter, you may have more match and less VOCA or less grant funds expended, and vice versa. But the match funds are held to the same VOCA standards as the OVS funding. So all matching funds must be used for VOCA allowable expenses. For instance, if you have fundraising activities in your agency, those are not allowable expenses under VOCA, and so neither your VOCA funds nor your matching funds can be used for those activities. So a couple more things about the required match. So I did just say that you don't need to bring in, your matching contributions don't have to be applied at the same exact time over the course of the year. However, the full matching share must be obligated within each annual contract period for which the VOCA grant funds have been made available. So even though you don't apply it throughout the year in the same way, it must be fully applied by the end of the year. If your full matching share is not provided in any given year, then your reimbursements will be reduced accordingly. So if you only raise 80% of your required match, you'll only be reimbursed for 80% of your grant claims. Finally, the VOCA programs, the required match programs that receive VOCA funds must maintain good records and documentation that clearly show your match. And part of that, you need to show the source of the match, the amount of the match, and the period in which the match was allocated. You also need to show your basis for determining the value of personnel services, materials, equipment, and space. So, and make sure you can demonstrate how you came up. It's a little bit more clear-cut with materials and personnel services, but sometimes space, how you came up for determining the cost for your space must be, the basis for that must be clear. And you must document your volunteer services, and to the extent feasible, document them in the same way that you use for your own paid employees. All right, so fiscal cost reports is, I think, the final, well, nope, not the final form, we have a couple more, but one of the final forms that we're going to talk about, although we're not going to show it. The fiscal cost reports are the requests for the way you request for reimbursement for OVS allowable expenses. They are submitted quarterly and document your spending by quarter. And you can see here the due dates. They're generally due the end of the following month that the quarter ends. So for this first quarter, 10/1 through 12/31, your due date would be January 31st. Note that the final fiscal cost report is not due until November 30th, which is actually 60 days or 2 months after the end of the quarter. That gives you a little bit more time to allow for additional fiscal year-end accounting. Once you've completed your fiscal cost reports, you submit those, upload those, as well as all supporting documentation as a, I will say use the word PDF here, but as a general PDF into the payments uploads area of the Grants Gateway that you should be familiar with from completing your RFA. You need to submit your supporting backup documents by category. So each supporting documents aren't one big document, but are uploaded by category. And please allow for up to 30 days to receive your payment from the time of submission. Now, there are sometimes when that 30 days does not happen, and that is when OVS stops the clock. and and that's when you fail to include your appropriate documentation. That will stop, you will receive what is considered a stop the clock letter, and that identifies what documentation you're missing. So if you did not have some of your supporting documentation that was not uploaded during the process. At this point, the 30-day clock will be stopped, and your payment will be delayed until your missing documents are provided. Once all your documentation is in and your payments will be sent electronically to your bank account, the bank account that is linked to your vendor ID number. So if during the life of your contract you find you need to request a change in your budget, you can submit a budget amendment request. Comprehensive budget amendment requests allow you to move funds or funds between all the categories in your contract. Budget amendment requests or BARs are submitted again via the Grants Gateway, so become comfortable with this tool. BARs go through a multi-level approval process. So it starts with a nature of modification request that you request through the Grants Gateway. There are a couple of approval levels, and at the end you'll get an approval by your OVS grants, by the OVS grants director. There is more information about how to go through this whole process in the Grants Gateway user guide. So hopefully at this point you aren't thinking about a budget amendment request, but there is more information there. You can also request more information about BARs when you have your initial introductory site visit. Your CMS, your contract management specialist, can help you with that. So that is the final information about the grants program. Right now we are going to go back to questions. I know that there have been a number of questions. Maybe do we want to start with the questions related to grants, because we just finished that, and then we will circle back. I know there were a lot of questions related to the compensation program, so we will circle back to those questions about compensation.
Just give us 1 minute real quick while we organize the questions, and we'll chime in with a few responses for you right now.
And feel free to continue to type them in if you have more.
Okay, everyone, we got a few questions we're going to go over real quick. Somebody asked, indicated that they switched to a database, and without paper records, how do monitors identify cases for review during site visits that we will send prior to a site visit in place of monthly paper records? Val has an answer for us.
Okay. If you cannot send the information from your database, it has to be available when the contract manager arrives at your, to conduct a site visit. You can sit at the computer. Normally what happens is you sit at the computer with the contract manager, and they use the functional time record for the dates that they say direct services was provided, and they can ask you to pull up for the person that works in that position, and you can pull up the services that they provided on that date, and then they can just randomly select the cases that they want to review.
All right. We had quite a few requests for us to send examples of completed forms, including the functional time record or position description form, and all you have to do is, if that's something you're interested in, is to reach out directly to your contract management specialist, and they'll be able to help you clarify or provide you with some more information. Somebody also asked, is our position description form due quarterly?
The answer is no. It's due at the beginning of the contract, and then you'll be asked for one at the beginning of each new contract year. The exception would be you'll provide a new position description form if you're doing a budget amendment, and that budget amendment affects the time in which you're going to be allocating to each position. So,
great. Another question was, can you recreate the functional time record in your own system if we keep all the same information?
The answer to that is yes, as long as it captures all of the same details.
Question here about match or volunteer match time. If we're not using volunteer time as match, do we still have to track volunteer time?
That would be up to the agency. We would not require proof of volunteer time if you were not using it for match.
Also regarding match, is it okay to use personnel expenses only?
Short answer is yes.
Is that last question about confidentiality?
All right, a couple last questions here. Again, if your question doesn't get answered, we still encourage you to submit it in the chat feature. We will export all questions and do our best to answer them after the webinar is over today. But we had one more question, grants related, that was, how is confidentiality maintained when case files are selected randomly on site?
There's multiple different ways. If this is a concern for you, you can reach out to your contract management specialist prior. There are instances where when we've come there, we've signed confidentiality agreements. We're just looking at them randomly to maintain that everyone is going along with the grant and collecting data and case notes properly.
All right, and then I'm going to circle back real quick to a few common compensation-related questions we had. In particular, many of you had concerns about immigration status or documentation status of claimants filing claims with us. I'm going to let Cassidy speak a little bit more on that as well.
So OVS does not care, or it's not relevant what the legal status of an immigrant may be. There's nowhere where we ask what their status is. The only thing that we do ask is Social Security versus not. So the undocumented status of an individual or a victim is not of a concern to us.
All right, one more quick compensation question was, what's the time frame since when a crime was committed against a victim and that they can file an OVS application?
The standard time frame is 1 year from when the crime was committed, but there are mitigating circumstances, and there's a place on the application that if it is over a year after the crime was committed, you can explain why.
Very good. All right. Again, keep typing questions. We'll leave the webinar open for a few more minutes, and we'll do our best to get back to you at a later date. I want to formally thank Jenny and Alan for putting together today's webinar. As soon as you exit your webinar today, when you exit, you'll be redirected to a SurveyMonkey link for an evaluation of today's webinar. Please give us your feedback. It helps us shape future trainings that we do. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning of today's webinar, it'll give you an opportunity to submit a request for more information regarding a possible free training or customized training you may be eligible for from our Training and Technical Assistance Request Program. I also just reshared PowerPoint slides from today, as well as the resource document that it's been referenced a few times. At a later date, maybe within the next week to 2 weeks, we will share a recording of this webinar along with those resources, the slides, and the resource document on the OVS website, and that will be distributed via broadcast email, but also on our training page on the web page. So, again, thank you everyone for attending today. We really appreciate your time, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.